Bill Clinton is a good person who's a flawed person. I don't think Hillary is a good person.
Finally, there's something that I think could solve the goddamn traffic problem.
Have you ever been divorced?
No. My wife's a lawyer. It'd be too expensive.
The White House claimed victory in Syria and says American troops there will start to come home, but stopped short of describing a full withdrawal. President Trump says the U.S. fulfilled its only goal there, to defeat ISIS, although a Defense Department report estimated more than 13,000 ISIS fighters may still be in Syria.
We don't sell data to advertisers. Advertisers don't get access to your data.
That was Mark Zuckerberg in April of what is obviously Facebook's worst year yet. And it just got worse. A New York Times review of the company's agreements with more than 150 businesses showed they allowed access to some data without a user's consent. Facebook says its contracts required partners to stick to its policies, and that they never violated a 2011 consent decree with the Federal Trade Commission that blocked them from sharing data without a user's permission. A judicial council has dismissed 83 ethics complaints filed against Supreme Court Justice Brett Kavanaugh. They included accusations of sexual assault, making partisan statements, and lying under oath to the Senate in his confirmation hearings. But the Senate did confirm him, and the council says it only has the authority to investigate judges on lower courts, not the Supreme Court. House Speaker Paul Ryan gave his farewell address today.
We have achieved a great deal. We have much to be proud of.
But nothing he said about himself could match the praise from the man who introduced him, outgoing Congressman Trey Gowdy.
If I had one pick as a modern-day founding father or mother, it would be you, Paul. Of all the people I know in politics, it would be you.
The House will be in order.
20 years ago today, the House of Representatives voted to impeach Bill Clinton.
Let it be said that any president who cheats our institutions shall be impeached.
It was only the second time a president's been impeached, and so far, the last. Clinton was acquitted by the Senate 2 months later, but the episode lives on as one of the ugliest chapters in American political history. At the center of it, opposite the president, was the man who investigated him, the special prosecutor, Ken Starr. Now, Starr is out with a new book about what went down 20 years ago. Vice News sat with him during some downtime in South Florida.
There was a time when you were the most criticized, is a nice way of putting it. I would say you, in the political world, you might have been the most hated.
Oh, please. That's so unkind.
I'm not the one saying it, right? You look back, you were, Ken Starr was a swear word for a lot of people.
For a lot of people, because it becomes so partisan. Bill Clinton is extremely likable, affable, all of the kind adjectives that you could use about him in terms of his relational skills. The country was doing well. We were at relative peace, and the economy was doing well. So who is the skunk at the garden party?
I have a very strong belief in facts and in truth.
You talk about reassessment. It was time to, you sort of had this reassessment over time.
Yeah.
What was it that you reassessed?
I thought I knew everything, but my reflections led me to a very different view of Monica Lewinsky.
What was your previous view?
It was not particularly charitable.
But she was 22 years old.
Exactly. But she was old enough to know what she was doing. I'm not talking about her relationship with the president. I'm talking about her attitude with respect to, you filed a perjurious affidavit. That's serious business, and your own mother is encouraging you to cooperate with the investigation. But she was determined, given her fierce loyalty to the president, not to do anything to hurt him.
She was in love with him.
Yes.
I mean, does that change the calculation in some way? Does it make you understand more why she was willing to just go into the trenches? Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is what I would say, the reflection years later has convinced me. Not only was she loyal, that was obvious, but she was also extremely effective at manipulating us.
How did she manipulate you?
She kept us waiting and waiting and waiting, and she knew, I think, all along that she wasn't going to cooperate.
And so what do you think of her now?
I view her as an American tragedy. Now, this totally reshaped her life. And I view it in sorrow.
Is that a bit mild? I would say for a time it destroyed her life.
I don't know that. I don't know that.
Imagine walking out into the street in 2001 as Monica Lewinsky.
But
probably pretty grim.
Monica, look over here!
I don't know what's in her mind. That's why I can't say that, quote, it destroyed her. And I think she was not well served by her lawyer. You could snap your fingers, have good lawyers, and have a deal. It would all be over. It could have been over in days, a couple of weeks max. And we would be in a very different place as a country now.
Do you think so?
Oh, totally.
Wait, let me just get this straight. So you think if Monica had struck a deal with you that day when your team confronted her, the country would be different?
Absolutely.
How so?
Because the president would not have fought for 7 or 8 months.
I did not have sexual relations with that woman.
Invoked executive privilege and other privileges in a flimsy way to find all these things rejected. He would not have been manipulating the rule of law the way that he did. He wouldn't have committed perjury before a federal grand jury that wanted to hear his testimony.
It depends upon what the meaning of the word is.
Yes. Christmas Eve last year, you happened to be in a restaurant in the West Village, a very large city, 9 million people in New York, and you ran into Monica Lewinsky.
Yeah.
What happened?
We had a very limited exchange, and I described it as what I thought was brief but poignant. I wished her well.
She described it very differently.
I know.
Creepy.
And avuncular.
Avuncular, too.
Now, come on, don't leave that one out.
Avuncular and creepy. I don't know if that's a combination I'd like, but avuncular and creepy, I'll give it to you.
I will emphasize the positive. The avuncular part.
And she said it was an opportunity for you to apologize, and you didn't.
Of course not. Of
course not.
Of course not. Bless her heart. She decided her own course of action. So I can say I regret what happened to her as a human being.
Reading your book, I got an impression that you really don't like Hillary Clinton. Bill Clinton, you acknowledge is a great politician, that, you know, he's a politician. He just...
Character flaws.
Character flaws, right? He has a way to skirt the truth.
And especially as a lawyer, that's what is so...
Right? Hillary, you don't like her, do you?
I don't think she's a good person. I think Bill Clinton is a good person who's a flawed person. I don't think Hillary is a good person.
So in November of 2016, early part of that month was quite a happy time for you, I'd imagine.
Well, I thought that I might get a call from someone in the Hillary Clinton White House saying, you know, you've served your country, we've had our disagreements. We'd like you to be Consul General to Tora Bora, Afghanistan.
I wanted to talk to you briefly about this this Me Too moment and the kind of reassessment of Bill Clinton from many people on the left. What do you think about that?
Well, I think all human beings need to be treated with dignity, and he did not do that. I mean, he savaged people, and he did that personally. He did it primarily through surrogates. And that's the sense of the huge character flaw that I find difficult to understand in Bill Clinton, who otherwise is a person, I think, of genuine empathy and compassion. I think he genuinely cares about people. But he was extremely exploitative.
You have not been forgiven by Bill Clinton.
Yeah. I gather. I mean, look, I did my duty. There it is. And so now we march on to a different chapter, I think, bitterness and so forth. Look, I like people. Even though I recognize they may not like me. My worldview is everyone all the time.
I've lived in LA for 16 years. This is, I think, finally, there's something that I think could solve the goddamn traffic problem.
Last night, Elon Musk unveiled a first step in his plan to disrupt soul-crushing LA traffic. But the big reveal showed he's no closer to doing it than sending humans to Mars. Reporters and Musk fans retreated to a bumpy ride down a short tunnel, a far cry from the glossy CGI renderings released earlier this year. Sometime in the future, Musk envisions a network of connected underground tunnels that will move cars and pods of people at 150 miles an hour.
You can have an elevator which only takes up a few parking spaces. You can have like a spiral ramp or a lung ramp. And you combine that with fast, low-cost tunnels, and I think you've got a very exciting transport solution.
It's a strange and impractical sounding vision, one he has recently had to scale back due to the realities of creating a viable public transportation system in LA. LA is plagued by gridlock, and despite that, public transit use is down. Between 2013 and 2017, ridership fell by an average of about 20 million trips per year. That may explain why LA Metro CEO Philip Washington is so excited to potentially partner with Musk.
We love the idea of his concept because it's taking cars off the road, and we're all into that.
Could LA Metro and the Boring Company collaborate?
Absolutely.
Yeah, what would that look like?
Well, I think that it remains to be seen. What projects, what innovation do they bring to us for consideration? We will be open to that.
I mean, it's legal, right?
Totally legal.
Okay.
This year, Elon Musk has become increasingly erratic, and last night, his presentation was filled with more jargon than facts.
They're sort of like wormholes. It's just like you drop down the worm, like you're driving around, oh, I need to get to the other side of LA or New York or whatever, drop down the wormhole, pop out the other side.
Despite that, people want to believe the technology might work. But to build an entire mass transit system in LA, the Boring Company may have to convince local governments to loosen regulations for it to build a tunnel machine that Musk says exists, but no one has ever seen.
I mean, the engineering does close for achieving a 15x improvement, and we're actually building the machine that can do that right now.
In fact, Musk abandoned a planned West Side Tunnel after a lawsuit brought by residents of wealthy enclaves like Brentwood and Pacific Palisades claimed the company was trying to evade environmental review. Juan Matute is the deputy director of the Institute for Transportation Studies at UCLA.
Does he have a compelling idea for how to make it real?
He has an idea of what it would look like at scale.
Okay.
There's not a lot of public information about how to get it there.
Beyond affording it, is it physically possible?
It is physically possible.
That's a good start.
It is physically possible. It's likely economically impossible.
Okay.
Although it plays well on Instagram.
Late last night, the Senate passed the First Step Act, a criminal justice reform bill that may be the first, and potentially last, bipartisan legislative accomplishment of President Trump's first term.
It just proves that when people trust each other, you can sit down and get legislation that's good for the country.
It's not a huge reform. The First Step Act only affects the federal prison population, currently about 181,000 prisoners. As of 2016, the overall nationwide prison population was more than 2.1 million. But for Washington, a bipartisan vote this big, it passed 87-12, is pretty remarkable. The First Step Act is expected to easily pass the House and get a signature from the president. The bill gives judges more flexibility when sentencing nonviolent drug offenders. It would soften the federal 3 strikes policy, so people would automatically get 25 years rather than life. And it would help some prisoners get out of jail early. The bill would increase the number of good time credits prisoners can earn, and allow some inmates to shorten their sentences by participating in educational and job training programs. The First Step Act is a unicorn in Washington. One with support from people who are typically at opposite ends of every issue.
Although it was a difficult negotiation session, what we came out with in the end was a good bill. And in many ways, it was made better by the fact that we had reached out to someone who initially didn't share our view at all.
This may be a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity for advocates of reform, because they have a Republican president on board. So if this is an imperfect bill, why even pass it right now? Why is now the time?
Because you take what you can get. Don't believe, I thought I had a great bill to start with. I've changed it 3 or 4 times significantly.
I'm used to that. That's the legislative process. You've got to move toward the point where you have an agreement and you think you can pass it, and you've got to ask yourself the hard question, is this better than having nothing? And I think it's dramatically better than having nothing.
I know when you were working on gathering support for this, though, you had to make some concessions to Republicans. You had to make a couple of provisions more strict. What were some of those concessions?
We used to have mandatory minimums, so judges had to take it or leave it. If you found Alex Jaffe guilty of crime X, then the potential sentence might be the low end 5 years, the top end 12 years. Well, we said, take a look at Alex Jaffe, not to suggest you're involved in criminal activity, but take a look at Alex Jaffe and make the decision based on her life and what she's done. Don't stick with the strict formulas. So we had to give up some of that flexibility in order to get Republicans to support it, but we still have some pretty positive changes.
Aren't you concerned, though, momentum will completely diminish if you pass this bill for any sort of reform? The people will say, we already dealt with the problem, we don't have to deal with it again.
I can tell you, you put your finger on the problem. It was 8 years ago that I did the first sentencing reform. It's called the Fair Sentencing Act. When we addressed something that I had voted for 25 years ago, thinking it was a good idea, turned out to be a terrible idea. We changed the sentencing guidelines for crack cocaine and powder cocaine. And then we came to the second bill 8 years later that we're now considering. So in Senate years, like dog years, they kind of come around infrequently. I'll look for opportunities anytime we can move toward sentencing reform that makes sense.
For couples thinking about divorce, the end of 2018 means more than just finding someone new to kiss at midnight. Under the GOP's tax overhaul, divorce agreements finalized after January 1st, 2019 will no longer be eligible for a 75-year-old tax deduction for alimony payments. But those finalized before the new year will be grandfathered in under the old rules, making this a December to remember for divorce attorneys.
I'm a matrimonial lawyer. I've been a matrimonial lawyer for more than 30 years.
And I've practiced in law 50 years.
I've been doing this for about 20 years, and I love it. Usually December is kind of a slower month in the office because of the fact that, there's holidays. So you never want to serve someone a summons in their stocking. So I am seeing a big December divorce rush. And, it's very stressful in our practice, and I've already told people in my office, I hope you don't have any really big holiday plans.
There's an element of the unknown in this case because the prior law has been effective as long as any living lawyer could remember.
There's a rush to get some of these cases done. I would certainly hate to have somebody sign an agreement on January 4th and lose the deduction.
Under the old rules, people getting alimony paid taxes on it, but the people paying alimony could deduct it from their taxable income.
In terms of why it has an effect, people who have higher incomes pay a higher percentage of their income in taxes than people who have lower incomes. So, for example, if the person who's paying is in the 45% bracket, and the person who's receiving is in the 35% bracket, all told, that means that 10% of that alimony is going to be basically picked up by the government in lower taxes.
Which means you and I are supporting a rich man's divorce. So it had to be fixed at some point, and now it's fixed.
Here's how it works. Let's say your ex claims to need $100,000 to cover living expenses. Under the old rules, you might agree to pay your ex that much, plus the taxes the federal government is going to charge. Why? Because you could write off that entire sum from your taxable income. Do the math, and that meant your alimony payment would ultimately cost you less than the amount of money your ex would get. Under the new rules, your ex won't have to pay taxes on alimony, but crucially, you won't be able to write it off. To fulfill that need, you're going to have to pay substantially more, or you might only offer to pay less. So negotiating alimony is going to get more complicated.
They fight over airline miles. They fight over everything in a divorce case. Who gets grandma's china? It could be tens of thousands, conceivably hundreds of thousands, maybe more. It's a battleground. Over my career, many cases that spun around on the alimony deduction.
But it'll make the fight over those last few dollars which in some cases is what you need to get the case done, just that much more difficult.
For better or worse, the landscape is lawyers fighting, lawyers making up, lawyers preparing papers, and then a judge at the end of the road has to say you're divorced.
According to congressional estimates, the IRS will reap $6.9 billion in new tax revenue over the next 10 years from eliminating the deduction. But the people paying those taxes aren't necessarily who you think.
In really big cases, the kind of multi-million dollar settlements you hear about sometimes, there typically is no alimony. Because the reason for alimony is to enable the party who doesn't earn as much or doesn't have as much to meet their expenses. And if you get a huge settlement with a lot of assets, you don't need that. I think the impact, the hurt, is really going to be felt is middle-class working people, where the $10,000 or $8,000 a year that you can save by taking advantage of the tax laws will make a difference in people's lives on a day-to-day basis. Those last dollars are the difference between being able to take a vacation. Those last dollars are the difference between maybe being able to go to the movies or go out to eat. So they're important.
Every December is paradoxical that here you are, you could hear the Santa Claus in the street, St. Patrick's, you hear the bells, and here they're sitting with me, cursing one another, and they're going to figure out how to do each other out of money. But that's always every December. This feeling to go ahead in a fury for divorce is strange.
In terms of how relationships work, I'm probably the worst person to ask about divorce since I've been married for more than 40 years.
Have you personally gone through a divorce?
I have not gone through a divorce.
Have you ever been divorced?
No. My wife's a lawyer. It'd be too expensive, and I don't need the aggravation.
Hey! Boom, boom, boom. I don't want to sit in Santa's lap. I'm grown now. Turn it off. Not my vibe. Gwen, up to your old tricks again. She sounds classic. Classic Gwen. She's not gonna lose. She's got that voice of an angel. Just wish she would have did a ska version or something, maybe more No Doubt style. Why the fuck do we have to do this 1950s poodle skirt? Let's do something different.
Leave the lights on, it may take a while, but I'm coming home.
Bars low, text slow, no goodbyes, no exo. My flight delay, no echo.
Yeah, he's like a little Pharrell, man. Tyler. Sounded like some Neptunes, killing chords. I like that. The B section what sold me when I went to that change. I was like, ooh, I'm all there. I'm fully with you.
Round young virgin.
Stop. Right there. What did he say? Round young virgin. Is this really what we're doing now?
Holy night.
If you don't get the fuck out of here.
Holy night.
It's not how they sing it at church. And you know goddamn well you need to take your ass to the Star Trek reunion. Fools get bored, too rich. Start doing stuff like that. You gotta be shatting me. Give me your hand. Hold my hand, damn it. Damn. Outstanding. Oh, we slapping that in the wit. Their drums are to die for. Damn it. Hi, guys, can we work? I mean, it's a Christmas song, but you see how they did it their way? I don't even like Christmas songs. It's just cheesy shit, man. What the fuck? I'm sick of it. But that made me feel like good spirits again. Season's greetings.